Hey everyone, Zach here. Wouldn't you know it? There was a few little audio issues with this one. Cleaned it up best we can. I think it's still perfectly listenable, but if you hear some weird echoes, that's what you're hearing.
Hey guys, this is Leah Williams. I did do quite a bit of cussing in this episode. I'm really sorry about that, so just, heads up about that cussing.
X-Men. Get it!
Hey everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where we rank every story from A to Z.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Zach, and Adam, hi.
Hey, man, it's a scorcher out there.
Man, it's a hot one, like 7 inches from the midday sun.
Whew, jeez Louise.
You know what? We've got a very smooth guest here who's going to help us get through this real inferno over time. You may know her from books such as Gwenpool Strikes Back, or Extremists, or some other stuff. There's a lot of it. It's Leah Williams. She's been on the show a bunch. Hi, Leah.
Hi.
I figure if someone's listening to this show, they have a decent understanding of your body of work at this point.
I've gotta assume.
Yeah. Well, I think for your listeners, it's fair to say, because I really love that we have this annual tradition now where I check in with you guys each year at the different stages of my comics career. And we've done this every year so far.
Yeah.
See, I was looking at the stats on this. The first time we had you on, it was your first X-Men backup. I think your second published Marvel comic.
The Excalibur reunion.
Then we had a miniseries.
Right before Extremists, yeah.
Right before Extremists.
And that was my first miniseries.
This is an ongoing.
And it's my very first ongoing.
So I think next year, if the trajectory works, you're going to be, hosting a line-wide event or something? Civil War 3 with Leah Williams, I think.
I don't know about that. I would only want to do tarot and swords again is the thing.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the part where you guys said, "Hey, X-Men fans know too much. Let's throw some goth stuff at them," and they'll be very confused. And you were right, and that's really annoying. You have made the sale of tarot manuals go up among the 30-year-old white dude crowd by 500%.
Oh, it's definitely Teeny that we can credit for that.
That's Teeny Howard, writer of Excalibur.
Mm-hmm. And she's also a co-architect of the Ten of Swords event along with Jonathan Hickman.
Now we're going to get to Ten of Swords, because I'm very excited about that. There's so many swords, 10 of them in fact, and possibly more from the other island. We don't know. We do know there's a crocodile who we all love now. And I know this is a spoiler, Leah, and I know you have to keep your mouth shut, but the crocodile's dead in 2 pages, isn't he? He's not going to make it. I'm very scared.
I don't believe that.
I'm very scared for Porg.
Oh, don't worry about your boy.
Oh, that's the most reassuring thing that anyone will get from this episode. But we did want to pull this back. So to start, this is your first big ongoing in the X-Men universe. So how'd that happen? How did Leah Williams end up on X Factor? How did this book get birthed?
I think it's actually a pretty boring story. The way that Jonathan explained it to me and Vita Ayala, because we're the de facto wave 2 of writers who came in a bit later, is, when Hickman first started working with Jordan D. White, senior X-Men editor, and Marvel to overhaul the X-Men line, one of the first things he did was okay, so who's in your stable of talent right now? Who can I tap for this? Who you got? And Jordan was like, okay, here are, the available writers who are doing some X work. Here's some of their stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then they kind of like mix and matched based on the books that they saw a clear need for in the line to make it cohesive and comprehensive as a whole, and fleshing out the world building of Krakoa and the new status quo. And there's also, the way Teeny ended up with Excalibur, which is one of my very favorite stories, is she heard John's plans and, internalized it overnight and really thought about it, and then came back the next day. This would have been at the Marvel retreat a couple years ago, I guess. She came back the next day with this absolutely baller pitch about mutant magic. And the way that I wasn't there, but the way that I imagine it is she finished talking about this and saying, this is going to be the first time that mutants will be able to develop not just their culture as a whole, free of oppression, but also their form of magic. It's going to be different. And I imagine she gets done explaining it, and then there's just silence where people are like, holy shit, she's amazing. And then John looked at her and he was like, well, you know what that is, right? That's Excalibur. And of course he's right. It is Excalibur. So for me, it was more like, we need someone to write X Factor. And I was like, are you joking? Who turned it down first? How far did you have to go down your list to get to me? And it took 3 weeks for it to feel real.
Now, I think that's interesting. So, this is X Factor, but it's a different cast. It's a different kind of vibe. It's still got some of the investigation, still have a little bit more of the bureaucracy side of thing that you got from the David runs and all that. So I'm curious, how much of X Factor was, there when you took on the book? Did they just say, hey, we need X Factor, that's the title of it, figure it out? Was there more elements that were involved in it? And then as kind of a secondary question on that, what were those essentials of X Factor that you felt had to be there for this to be a capital X, capital F X Factor book?
So for me, okay, let me backtrack. What they came to me with was, this is the team that's going to be in charge of tracking down missing mutants and solving murders and that kind of thing. So they don't prosecute, but they do go looking for missing mutants, because and you saw this in the first issue, so spoiler alert, but
yeah, we're not, just as a heads up, guys, we're not going to get deep into spoilers for the first issue, which comes out Wednesday, but we're going to talk about the book. So if you want to go in blind, maybe hit that pause button right now and come back to us on Wednesday at 8 a.m. I assume you're going to wake up and read it first thing in the morning and then really need someone to talk about it with, and we can provide that service to you.
So, thank you for that disclaimer. One of the things that we establish is that X Factor will go looking for mutants when Cerebro hasn't been able to pull a backup from them for a certain amount of time. If they end up on a missing persons list, that's when it gets flagged for X Factor's investigation. So the concept that was brought to me was, this is the team in charge of missing persons, and that's it, solving murders and that kind of thing. And in my idea generation phase, when I was really starting to develop the concept for it further, I was like, it makes sense to me that these guys would work really closely with the Five, because after all, aren't they providing proof of death in order to initiate resurrection? So, like, that's the bureaucracy of it. There's no higher authority that they're answering to. It's really what they're doing is more like troubleshooting the resurrection process. And, you know, making sure that we have confirmation of death before we can initiate somebody's resurrection procedure, obviously, so that a bunch of clones don't end up running around Krakoa, that kind of thing.
When have clones ever caused the X-Men any problems ever?
I can't imagine how that might not be an issue longer down the line, but please continue.
Well, in my first few passes at the pitch for this, I immediately made a beeline for the same sort of like stress testing of this world that I did with extremists in Age of X-Man, which is I immediately ran for the glaring problems that I saw. Like, this is a huge issue, this world that you've developed. It erases sexuality, including queerness. Like, that's something that I want to explore because I see it as a problem.
When you were doing extremists.
Right. So I did the same thing here in terms of, like, I made a beeline for what I considered to be the potential pitfalls of resurrection of, like, well, what about accidental clones? And what about blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff? And what I ended up developing instead of doing that, because I really love Krakoa as a new status quo for mutants. I believe in what we're doing. I don't want to break the toys. I want to show it working. So what I did instead was make a future forward document called the Resurrection Protocol. And this is the Resurrection Bible from many, many years into the future of Krakoan culture and the Five and everything that they've learned. I started with that, and my first 30 issues are reverse engineered from each of these rules in the Resurrection Protocol.
Okay, that is so exciting.
So this is a promise that Leah Williams' book is not getting canceled until at least issue 31. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, I'm definitely, like, hedging my bets here. I know I'm kind of a newer writer and an unknown variable, so I'm coming at this with, like, all right, well, I'm giving you guys Krakoan Endgame starting in issue 1, but, like, that's where the breadcrumb trail begins, but you gotta keep reading to find out what it is.
I think one of the things that I've been curious about, especially just since day one of House of X, is, you know, how much of the world's quote unquote Bible, you know, has been written. So it's really interesting to hear me say that, like, despite the fact that the idea of resurrection wasn't your idea, that you, like, I've got to ask, like, how long is this document with the rules of the resurrection protocols? And is it a collaborative process, or is it something that you're just going in and saying, this is what we're doing, everybody's got to follow my rules?
Well, spoilers. Isn't it in the first issue?
It is. It's the data pages printed in the back, but they're heavily redacted and blacked out, so you can't.
I was meaning to talk to you about that. I thought something was wrong with my copy. Something was up with it. I don't know.
It's part of the game. As we go through the narrative of X Factor and reveal the issues they encounter that initiate the establishment of these individual rules, we unredact rule by rule and show you how they're constructed. So what was the question that I was just asked? Oh, about resurrection. Mm-hmm. And and the establishment of the protocol. Okay, so it is a really collaborative process overall, and this is kind of a huge part of the joy of working in the X office right now with this group of people, is that we do collaborate really well together. It's a very organic process. We love to brainstorm together and have a lot of fun sharing ideas and that kind of thing. So when I started, because I did, sort of covetously take over resurrection in my book, I thought it was something that would make X Factor really stand apart, but also is kind of an intuitive inclusion into what we're already doing. I definitely wanted to work closely with everybody in terms of like, are we all on board with this as the Resurrection Bible? These are our official protocols moving forward that we're going to abide by. And went through a couple passes based off of Hickman's notes on it, because, this is his world. This is his baby that we're all coming into. So he has more of an aerial view than we do. He really helped me a lot with thinking of more of the rules than I had before. And once I went through, I'd say, I think I'm on my third and a half draft of the Resurrection protocols now. But the coolest thing about it is that these are the rules where, they're starting out redacted, they're blacked out. And as we encounter problems that would facilitate the formation of these rules, we reveal them, but it doesn't just have to happen in X Factor. So I love being able to, when somebody in their books, they need some kind of resurrection MacGuffin for whatever they're trying to make happen. It's like, here is this very convenient document where you can look at these rules and imagine what the problem could have been to get there. And if that fits with what you're doing, then it helps me out because I get to unredact more of these rules.
Oh, I love that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. And I like the idea that, you mentioned, it's Hickman's world or whatever, but it really, because of the collaboration, doesn't necessarily feel like one person's sandbox. And I think a really good example of that is the fact that you're really the first time that we're getting behind the scenes access to the five. We've
the
seen
five,
the
for people
five
who don't know, are the Resurrection Machine. Gold Balls, also now known as Egg.
I was going to say, it's Egg now.
It's for the SEO, for the people who haven't been reading it. He was Gold Balls. He wanted a new change because they aren't balls, they're eggs.
They're eggs.
They're eggs.
It's
all eggs. X-Men's just eggs and swords. That's all it is now.
Yeah.
Just eggs and swords.
But this is a real chance for us to actually hear them talk, hear them interact, have them on a break, talk about some of the problems that they're having with resurrecting mutants constantly. What's your approach to the five in terms of their part in your story? Because they're not technically the main cast, but I assume they are going to factor in, no pun intended, very, very prominently.
They do, yeah. They're so 10 of Swords, X Factor issue 4, which is 10 of Swords chapter 2, is a very five-centric issue. And, you can see them right on the cover, so you know what you're getting. But they're also heavily featured in every single issue because they are part of the same office, I guess we would call this. The work that they're doing with Resurrection happens so closely intertwined with X Factor Investigations, which is like the field team that we do see a lot of them. And this was a huge like get for me as a writer and an architect of this book, because this was the first big change to the base concept that I suggested, outside of the parameters of like X Factor, missing mutants, that kind of thing. I was like, well, I would also love to be the Resurrection book and focus time on the Five. And that came out of my own fascination with the Five, everything that's been established about their work dynamic and how it's kind of a holistic process where they make each other stronger. I was really fascinated with that. And also, I have the boon of being able to like read the Twitter reactions to everything for half a year before starting work on this. So I could see where people had a lot of questions and a lot of fascination with the Five that I knew wasn't getting coverage elsewhere. So I was really, really excited to be given permission to kind of fold them into what we're doing.
It is exciting. Have there been
any questions that you've seen pop up about the Five that have, made you think or made you be like, I think people might be mistaken about this or be thinking the wrong way about stuff?
Yeah, actually. And it's not so much about the Five, but about the Crucible, and I would say mutants who we would look at as having a disability, entering the Crucible to come back with a different physicality, a different body. And I'll use Hellion as an example.
Hellion don't got no hands anymore.
Right. Yeah. So I get a lot of questions about if Hellion is going to enter the Crucible to fix his hands. And my response to that is always like, oh man, there are absolutely people with no hands reading you ask me this right now. How do you think it makes them feel?
Yeah.
And I think that X-Men more or less works better as a disability metaphor than it does a civil rights metaphor, because we're talking about people being othered for something in their physicality, but they experience a really like ingrained and very common way of experiencing prejudice that is so different from racism or homophobia. These things cannot be equated in my mind, because there are also gay mutants and black mutants who are experiencing these other axes of oppression at the same time. But I don't think it's appropriate to look at like WizKid, for example, and be like, okay, enter the fucking Crucible, fight Apocalypse so that you can be reborn as somebody who doesn't have to be in a wheelchair. That's horrific, That
is, you also did just put into my mind the concept of WizKid from Inferno.
I love WizKid.
Going into the Crucible, and that's simultaneously entertaining and horrifying.
It's horrifying. And one of my favorite things about Krakoa, though, is that it does not ask this of mutants. It does not look at Hellion and say, you are disabled because you have prosthetic hands. It instead asks, how can I adapt? Like, this is a land, this is a society that adapts to an individual instead of asking an individual to assimilate. And that's what equality is. Equality is not assimilation. So I think that it's definitely a case by case basis. people have asked about, No Girl getting resurrected with her own physicality. And of course, we've already like seen versions of her in the future where she has this badass, techno-organic, sexy plant body, but we don't know how she gets it. So, like that's already a done deal. We know that is an inevitability at some point. But for characters like WizKid or Silhouette or Hellion, I think it's much, much more interesting and wholesome to show the way that Krakoa just effortlessly adapts to their needs.
That's a perspective I haven't necessarily heard before, but I really like it. There's a lot there to chew on.
Well, my thing is like, okay, so this is like political praxis for me. I hated J.K. Rowling before she was this awful, and it's because years and years ago, when she was asked about the possibility of autistic wizards or wizards with disabilities, her answer was like, oh no, they just get cured.
Oh,
and like, that is horrific to me, because it means that autistic children and children with disabilities who are reading this interview with her right now, what they're taking away from that is, oh, I can't be magic. And I hate it. I hate that with every fiber of my being. I would never want to make a reader feel that way. So I'm more interested in showing, like, you do not need to change who you are to live in Krakoa. That's not what this place is.
I love that there's the basic building blocks in all of this, between the resurrection protocols, between, the Crucible. And I'm sure Hickman's going to be exploring this idea of Nightcrawler's religion. Like, there's all these building blocks to kind of play around with. I do want to say, though, that in reading the first issue of X Factor, it's still very much a Leah Williams, David Baldeon book. And it has a really great sense of humor about it. Like, it has jokes. And I'm just curious.
Several times.
Yeah.
like out loud that laugh, not like, oh, that was funny.
Yeah, it's a genuinely funny book. I think anybody who read the Gwenpool Strikes Again mini, which was absolutely hilarious, would agree that you absolutely have that voice going. Do you feel pressure to have like some humor in your book, or is that just a natural extension of your own style?
I would say it's a natural extension of the tone of the book. I think that I am working with a cast that is very quirky and very traumatized. Most of these people have a lot of trauma in their past.
Yeah.
And I think that they deal with it in different ways.
And that cast, by the way, for people who don't know, is Rachel Summers / Grace / whatever last name she's going by right now. That's her choice. Polaris, iBoy is there. Daken is there. Who else? Prodigy's there.
North Star.
North Star's there.
Rachel has
and
a pet.
Aurora seems like she's coming soon.
Yes.
Zach, you forgot about Amazing Baby.
I did forget about Amazing Baby, which is a crime. I forgot about Amazing Baby.
Amazing Baby, who is Rachel's emotional support werewolf.
Right. Definitely someone one of her gal pals definitely gave her a pet, and she loves it very dearly.
Yes.
Gal pal.
Listen, we are not putting undue pressure on our guests to deal with situations that Marvel has to deal with.
Fair.
We all know, and that's fine. And Leah does not need to comment on that.
No.
I mean, I've tweeted about how I think Rachel is like a stoner butch lesbian, No, sorry, soft butch lesbian. And I'm
Oh,
valid.
okay. Yeah, no one's disagreeing with that except for, like, I don't know, the legal department at Marvel. So
I have, yeah, in one of my earliest rejected drafts, I definitely tried to have Rachel growing Krakoan weed. I thought it was a very natural thing for her to do there, and I can't.
For the children.
Of course.
You know how there was the survival guide to the X Mansion years ago, back in the 90s? It'd be really great if we could get like a spiral bound field guide to Krakoa, like with all the weird plants that taste like root beer, or right? Because they keep mentioning all these things. Anyway, sorry, that was an aside.
Or like a bagel tree, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, really, it's like you can ask this land for anything and it delivers. So there's no currency. Everything is free. All the clothing, the fabulous clothing that people are wearing, made out of Krakoan fibers. There's no hunger or starvation. So it extends as far as your imagination can in terms of what you ask Krakoa to hopefully bestow on you, such as a bagel plant.
It's the chocolate factory, you know? With hopefully less accidental deaths.
Listen, they can reverse the accidental deaths. If someone really makes you mad, you can shoot them in the face and say, sorry, empath kind of pissed me off. We'll get him later.
So I feel like you working with David Baldeon again, it just feels like a match made in heaven. His style, I would describe as like just cartoony enough to sell a lot of the humorous stuff that you do, but it's also realistic enough that there are some darker elements. I mean, obviously this is also kind of a murder mystery book. It feels like. What's your working relationship with him like, in terms of creating the finished product here?
I absolutely adore working with David. There is nobody who I would have felt more confident and excited going into X Factor with other than David, because we had just come out of Gwenpool Strikes Back, which was a really brutal creative boot camp because of the lack of a fourth wall. So it absolutely was super difficult for David and I to systematically break down all of our ingrained rules about what we know comics are, and the reason that fourth wall exists, in order to do something truly creative and inventive. So now we're coming into X Factor, where that fourth wall is back in place, but we've also learned a lot of new things about storytelling and what we can do, and we collaborate really closely. I adore working with David. I think he's brilliant, and there will be times when I'm up late noodling on a script, and I'll see that he's up late working on layouts or something, so I'll message him just to ask for his thoughts on something that I'm doing, and it comes from a place of knowing that he and I are so locked step in terms of our shared vision for the book that we move in the same direction without consulting each other, and it's always the correct one. And sometimes it's a matter of his direction is just better than mine, but it's still the same book, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I love getting his ideas, and I'm getting his feedback on stuff and sort of tailoring what I'm doing in a script to his thoughts on it before I turn something in.
Yeah, I'm so just flipping through it. I'm so impressed by how many pages kind of have these amazing borderless full bleed backgrounds, and then he's weaving the individual panels over it, and then
That's
I don't
something
know.
that I would love to brag about David doing, because it's an approach he brought to this book and to world building and Krakoa in general. What he deliberately wanted to do was bring a lot of like prospect and openness to Krakoa, because at the time that he was drawing this, we hadn't gotten to see a lot of Krakoa yet through the other books, or have it be as explored as like a wild open land. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's the openness in these panels and those big blue skies, and how some of the panels feel like a landscape painting. That was something he really deliberately wanted to play with in terms of the perspective. And I think it's
really
brilliant.
cool.
It's super effective.
Really cool.
Now, you've mentioned a lot about the collaboration between you and David, and even in this interview with you and the rest of the writers in the X office. How has that, because to me it's a very unique thing, the level of collaboration line-wide that you guys are doing. So how has that impacted your writing in this book?
I think that it makes everything stronger as a whole, because, Adam, you used the word sandbox before. It doesn't just feel like we're working out of John's sandbox. And that's the same way that I would state it. It's that we're all playing in the same sandbox and sharing each other's toys. So it makes for something strong line wide, because we have the same locations, like the Point in X-Force, or the Healing Gardens, which is Krakoa's hospital. We're developing this world together and establishing, what the standardized like references are for these things moving forward. And I think that it makes Krakoa as a habitat feel all the more real, because you can recognize the same places across the different books. And I also think that it adds just a really richness to the storytelling coming out of this world. The fact that we are, there are a lot of X books, but we don't expect people to be like buying and reading them all. We hope people will just, read what they want and what they enjoy. And that's why all the books are so different. They're placed deliberately in positions of storytelling to offer a unique perspective of life in Krakoa.
Now, with that collaboration and with that comes crossovers, which we're about to enter 10 of Swords, the crossover where there's 10 swords and the X-Men have them. You're the second book in this. In, 22 chapters?
I sure am.
Hey, what's that like? That a lot of pressure, Leah? You got a lot of pressure tying in issue 4 of your run to the second issue of a 22 to 24 and a half issue massive crossover extravaganza? Question mark?
Literally the most professional pressure I have ever experienced in my life. And it's not just because of, batting second to motherfucking Jonathan Hickman. But because this crossover event is like the first big industry crossover coming out of the pandemic. So comic shops are starting to reopen in some places where it's safe, and this is something that they're looking at in terms of hopefully being pretty rejuvenating for comic shops that have really been hit hard by the pandemic and Diamond shutting down. So it's an enormous amount of pressure. I had to like anesthetize myself to it at some point and just accept that, Hickman is not going to let us do anything subpar.
So you feel like all of this is getting dialed up big time? I mean, we went from this being a almost like half as long to like something extraordinarily massive now, right?
Yeah, and I think also it had to do with fan response.
Yeah.
Because, like, just from the mention of, it's about swords, and people were like, dope, we love it. I think that had a lot to do with it, too. Like, oh, okay, so people like this?
The moment, I tell you, the moment. Adam, were you there when I got the email about
Yes.
about the swords?
Yeah.
We stopped in the middle of the floor of C2E2, like right by the bathrooms, and had all of us huddle around my phone to look at that very pretty Mark Brooks picture and said, they're doing swords? Why are they doing swords? This is great. We should have more swords.
Because swords are cool.
They are cool.
And what's cooler than, like, swords? More swords.
Everybody gets a sword.
Yeah, that's really...
Well, not everybody.
Not everybody.
Not everybody. Eyeboy does not appear to get a sword, even though Mark Brooks drew him with a very good sword with so many eyeballs on
sword.
it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of red herring swords in that illustration.
That's a good
Maybe
sword.
one day the eye boy can get the eye sword, not an eyesore, an eye sword. Who knows?
But it got bigger. Like the event got bigger.
Oh yeah, okay. So you know how Taco Bell has like food scientists that engineers? No, this is a really relevant metaphor.
I know this is not where I thought you were going with this. Keep going.
Okay, so you know how Taco Bell has those food scientists that will literally like engineer their food to be addictive and tasty?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's what Ten of Swords is.
Yes.
It is something that it is a crossover event that has been meticulously crafted and engineered to be just fucking badass. It's like the coolest shit you can possibly imagine. And I mean, there's this one new relationship dynamic that the Marvel millennials have been memeing the ever-loving fuck out of for like 6 months now. We're obsessed with it. And the day that these issues start to hit the stands, we will unleash just a wrath of memes upon the internet because we've been waiting to share this obsession with readers.
Yes.
I love that so many of the writers are little gremlins like the rest of us.
Oh my god,
It's
yes.
so refreshing. Oh.
Speaking of, fans loving characters, I just wanted to ask about a couple of characters in particular who are appearing in your book. One of the characters who I was most surprised by is one that I have never really been able to like. In fact, I think I've said on this show before that I generally hate Dakin. X Factor 1, he's like absolutely delightful, and I can't wait to read more.
He's good, actually, and I'm so mad that I don't hate him anymore.
Like, what is your approach to him, and like, how do you make him just this really wonderful character that I want to spend more time with?
So he's a really like complex and layered character, like a lot of my cast, where they've been depicted differently across different runs, which kind of turns them into a patchwork quilt of different traits. Yeah. But for my purposes, I really do like folding it all into kind of a deep well of nuanced character decisions and that kind of thing. And Dakin is somebody who has experienced a lot of growth in recent continuity. He is in a completely different place in his life now than he was in his origins, or even, 7 years after that. And I'm really interested in developing this kind of newer, softer side of him, because he is in the same boat with the rest of my cast where he has a hugely traumatic upbringing and horrific history. But, you know, like I've said before, I really believe in Krakoa and what we're doing and kind of the holistic, adaptive nature of it. And I'm not interested in like rehashing a lot of their trauma or story mining from that so much as showing them moving forward together and healing and working through these things, because I think that it opens up the potential for some really extraordinary progressions of their power sets as well. And I think that empowerment is a huge thing that factors into it. So for Dakin specifically, the way that it plays out with him is he's experimenting with things like kindness right now. And he's not the best at it.
No.
But he's trying.
Well, you just mentioned power sets. I was very struck by the fact that you went back to a power that Rachel had that is not used very commonly.
And then made a joke about it so that everyone knew that, like, yes, I know she doesn't normally do this because everyone forgets about it.
I have the most, like, OP-ass cast. They're all way too overpowered. But Rachel is, like, by far the most incriminatingly overpowered character on the cast.
Yeah.
She's very good at things.
She's very good at things. And she also has a chrono skimming ability that I think is particularly useful in an investigative scenario. And we do see her use this several times throughout the first arc. It's an established aspect of her kind of investigative, utility.
Mm-hmm.
I do appreciate that despite her being overpowered, she's kind of being written as very subdued almost, and like kind of just this calm person who's tagging along, sort of like is not leading the team.
Yeah, and that was definitely a deliberate decision, because with her and with Polaris, obviously they both have leadership potential, and we've seen them act as leaders before. But at the same time, there's a lot of character work that needs to be done with them and with Aurora as well. And I want to free that bandwidth so that they can relax and focus on themselves and living well, because it needs doing. They have never really had the opportunity to flourish like that. And that's why, I didn't tap them for X Factor leaders, but instead went with North Star, who has never led, but is absolutely primed for this right now, coming out of Extremists, especially.
Yeah, the reluctant, the leader. Speaking of a character who has only really gotten to flourish a little bit more recently under your pen, how good does it feel to write Fred Dukes again? Should we assume that he will be a recurring character?
Yes, absolutely. So he is the owner-operator bartender of the Green Lagoon. That's his joint. And this is Krakoa's Tiki Bar. So it's a really central location that appears in everyone's books almost. And I had Freddie, I had him in mind for X Factor stories. I knew what I wanted to do with him. But then when Ben Percy and Josh Casaro were working on X-Force issue 9, I want to say, Josh asked if they could be responsible for coming up with Krakoa's first bar, and if it could be a tiki bar. And then it was Ben's idea to have Freddie be the bartender.
Yes.
And this I really love because it still perfectly meshes with what I have planned for Freddie. It doesn't work against that, but instead it also elevates him to a position where he's in a centralized location and can appear in other books as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a really good storytelling location for him.
I love it so much. I am sitting here holding my Josh Cassara, Fred Dukes bartender Scrabble scorecard.
Amazing.
It's so good. It's so good. He doesn't draw the mustache, which I know is in your book and has not been in his other couple of appearances. So maybe we should tell Jordan he needs to get that good mustache back all the time.
Man.
We got one more before we get into listener questions, and this will be a very quick one. I'm staring at the other piece of Josh Cassar art that I own. It's also at the Green Lagoon. Jean Grey is looking over at my man Japheth. Maggot, he's sitting there drinking a good drink with his slug boys. I don't want any spoilers. I don't want anything. Is he doing okay? Is Maggot all right?
Maggot's okay.
Okay. That's all I needed to know. That's all I needed to know. I want to know. I want to know if he's all right. Like, he doesn't need to star in anything. He doesn't need like to be the most important of the X-Men. I just want to know that in this new world order, Maggot's doing okay. But I'm not the only one with questions. We have listeners who asked a bunch of questions of Leah, and we're not getting to like even half of them because there's so many. But Leah's very popular on the Twitters, if you haven't noticed. Leah, have you noticed you're very popular on the Twitters?
No.
No?
I don't I don't think that's a real thing. I think popularity is just a government conspiracy. I don't
Right. Much like Tom King's comic career. But we need to
It's a psyop.
I thought I could get through that without cracking, and I couldn't. TD Mollusk at Sierra Barang 2 on Twitter asks, Battle of the Atom is well known for its quality ASMR content. So bottle check, what you drinking?
I just drank, and this is going to be the answer to Dan's question as well, but in the course of sitting here, I drank 24 ounces of a Wawa watermelon Red Bull slushie.
Yeah.
So I'm never sleeping again, probably. It tasted like Sour Patch Kids.
That's a lot. That sounds terrible. That sounds like so much sugar. Adam, what you drinking? What you drinking right now, Adam?
I'm just drinking some iced tea to hydrate because it's just so hot outside. My goodness.
It is hot outside. And guys, I don't know if this got through on post, but if you hear a fan, it's because some of us are very hot. And we're dealing with that in our own ways.
Yeah.
I am actually not drinking any alcohol for July, which is not a moral decision. It's I needed to lose some weight, and this seemed like it worked for Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy, so maybe if I do that, it'll work. We'll see what happens.
It's not a bad plan.
It's not, except for that now I have to start drinking bubbly, sparkling water lime.
Oh, no.
It's fine, because it's like water, but cold.
Yeah.
Now, Rob on Twitter, Robert Secundus, does asks, the detectives of X Factor don't seem to be cops, but they aren't exactly traditional private investigators either. How would you describe their relationship with the state, in this case being the Krakoan government or the Quiet Council? And do you see anything in this series thematically in conversation with extremists? Why did I say it bad? I don't know.
So I really like this question a lot because I appreciate the chance for disambiguation disambiguation. Yeah, I said it right.
Yeah, you're better at pronouncing things than me.
Sometimes I say words aloud with confidence that I've only ever seen in print, so I definitely mispronounce stuff a lot of the time, but I say it with such conviction that people never correct me.
Right.
So what's really different about X Factor in comparison to Extremists is they're more like IT than anything else. And also, Krakoa is not a formalized state. It is a nation. It is a group of people with shared values. There is a Geist, in terms of like the Volksgeist, the Hegelian philosophical definition of like a group of people with shared behaviors and traits and values. But they're not a state like the United States is, a cohesive entity. And that kind of power structure doesn't really exist the same way in Krakoa. There is not an official hierarchy. It's more of like a lateral power system, where we do have like the Quiet Council there to keep people in check, but there's no cops. Krakoa is gonna scare the wrong people, but it's what I love most about it. Krakoa is a lovely communist society, and it works very well.
I like it. I'm excited, and I like it. I like that this island is good, actually.
Yeah, it is. And
even if it has to eat a little bit of everybody all the time.
But just like psychically. And
clone bodies. They do throw a few clone bodies in the pit every once in a while, so he stays fed, but yes.
It's as a treat.
I mean, that's what
Just
the
a little.
5 is for. It's
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
Krakoa can have a little Xavier as treat.
But yeah, a lot of these organizations like X Factor, the X-Men, New Mutants, these are organizations that work in community building. They work for the community in like a neighborly capacity. They're not policing each other or anything like that.
I like it. Easy Lost PKM trainer, I assume Pikmin, like Olimar from the Nintendo series, at Asimov Fangirl asks, howdy, for X-plot reasons, the X-Men have to form a team to produce a comic, OGM, floppies, webcomics, etc. Which members would you choose for the task, and what are their jobs? Writer, penciler, inker, editor, etc.
Well, I'm going with the X-Men definition, meaning mutants. So I'm gonna say
Right.
Prodigy could do pencils and inks just from like, walking around the bullpen at Marvel HQ. He'd be able to absorb these abilities. And I think, I don't know who I'd tap to write it.
I mean, we know Pyro has written steamy romance novels. I don't know how well that would translate.
Yeah, I don't either. You know what? You know who's a poet? Maggot.
He's a poet.
There you go.
You know what audience you're playing towards right now, don't you?
I think the writers that I would most want to see write a comic would be Maggot or Fred Dukes.
Speaking of Fred Dukes, Brawl 2099 at Brawl 2099 does ask, what's the most valuable book in Freddie Dukes' collection?
I think that Freddie probably has a soft spot for vintage collected editions of like the Chronicles of Narnia or Grimm's Fairy Tales or something like that. I think that this would be sort of a secret source of whimsy for him, and he'd have eBay alerts on stuff like this.
You think Mr. Freddie Dukes is a big fan of Mr. Tumnus?
I could see it.
I think that would work. Levi Lavi at Levi P. Tompkins does ask two related questions that I'm going to put together because I think they're good. Given the five will have a presence in this book, will we explore Proteus as a person at all? I don't really think that's ever been done before. So does Proteus does he chill now? Does he say dude? What's up with Proteus?
He doesn't say dude. He does in issue 1 because it's a mistake. There's a panel where the tails of 2 speech balloons are switched. So we've got Proteus saying a Gold Balls line and
Gold Balls speaking in a very Scottish accent.
But yes, absolutely. We explore who Proteus is. This is one of the most exciting aspects of being able to take on the 5 in my book, was being given the chance to develop him in this capacity when he is fulfilled and he's not having to consume or struggle to survive. He can just be, and he can thrive and flourish. And I think that it has really beautiful implications for not only his life in Krakoa as an individual, but what that brings to the table with the 5 kind of writ large, with how that affects their developing work ethos.
Now, as a follow-up, iBoy really seems like the baby of this team, even compared to Prodigy, who's probably relatively young. This person doesn't know how time works, which that doesn't make sense in Marvel anyway, so we'll take that way off the table. Much of this team doesn't exactly seem nurturing, so who's going to take care of this poor boy? Hey, Leah, who's going to take care of iBoy? He needs help, doesn't he? He's so soft.
He does. He is definitely Team Baby. He's baby, and he's also the only one of them who doesn't have a significant amount of trauma.
I was actually really worried you were going to give him a really sad, traumatic backstory.
Like getting killed and then being brought back with inconsistent writing across titles.
Listen, that's not the point.
I mean, he doesn't even remember that.
No.
Nobody does.
No one does.
Yeah, that was an accident. I think that it provides something valuable, though, to have that difference in his perspective. And it's something that the other characters do talk about. First of all, they're all protective of him, with the exception of, Daken. Daken is definitely the rudest to iBoy, and it's because Daken is trypophobia representation. You know, those people who like can't look at lotus seed pods without their skin crawling.
Right, content warnings for pomegranates.
Right. So that's what Daken feels every time he looks at iBoy. He's like, you are full of holes. You are making my scalp itch. I'm going to be rude to you until you go away. But other than that, Trevor is a very sweet and kind boy who, like, everybody on the team is pretty protective of, because they are trying to shield him and keep that intact. And it's one of my favorite aspects of this team. Northstar is also kind of rude, but it's for Trevor's own good.
Northstar's rude to everyone, though, so that's fair.
Right.
You can't not.
Hey.
That's out of character.
Hey, Brickheads X does ask, assuming Gwenpool didn't give Jeff to Deadpool, would Gwen and Quentin have had shared custody of Jeff the Landshark after their breakup? And how did Jeff take the split?
No, because I have my own cute mascot character. Jeff the Landshark is Kelly Thompson's baby and sticking with her. So I unfortunately cannot hypothesize as to where he would have ended up in Krakoa.
Could Amazing Baby shapeshift into looking like Jeff the Land Shark?
Oh,
And
he sure could.
fill that role if you needed it.
Someday, Amazing Baby is going to be the size of a cow and telepathically communicating with Rachel in short sentences. And it's going to take like 6 arcs to get there, but gosh, I can't wait.
Oh my god, it's going to be
Very
awesome.
exciting. Very excited for Amazing Baby. Now, this is the last question we have for you from Twitter, so we want to thank everyone who didn't get around to it. But this is a question really to understand consistency on things. Gwenpool asks, if there were 2 guys on the moon and one of them killed the other with a rock, would that be fucked up or what?
I maintain that when you nut in space, it pushed you backwards.
When you nut in space, it pushes you backwards. Yes, we all know this.
That's my official answer.
That's just physics.
Exactly. It's just science.
Leah, it's always an adventure with you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on. It's always great. Love having you. If people like your particular brand of human, where can they find out what your whole deal is?
I guess social media, like Twitter or Instagram. I'm Handaxe on Instagram, and my monster is Chic, Chic on Twitter. I would mostly just recommend reading X Factor, I think.
Which comes out in 2 days on Wednesday. And wait, does Empire are you writing Empire 2 or Empire X-Men 2?
So I co-wrote that with Jerry Duggan and Ben Percy. I wrote the last 10 pages of that. It's batshit. We had a lot of fun collaborating on that.
Hey, it's alien plants versus mutant zombies versus old ladies.
And some other surprises that Jerry Duggan threw in for you.
Jerry, I
So the way
Jerry.
that I don't know if it's common knowledge, but the way that we wrote the Empire stuff, the X-Writers did, is like a game of telephone, where it started with Hickman writing like the first batshit 20 pages, and then it got passed off to Teeny, who then wrote like the end of that issue, and then that got passed off to Jerry, who wrote the first 10 pages of issue 2, and then that got passed off to Ben, who wrote the next 10 pages, then it got passed off to me, and we all did this without telling each other what we were doing. And it means that once you got to the end of the chain with like Vita and Ed, what they were being handed was every X-writer like exponentially trying to one-up each other and just make shit crazier and messier. So it's insane. It's a lot of fun.
And you don't have to read Empire to know what's going on in this, honestly, guys. There's plant aliens. There you go.
Sounds awesome.
At least for issue 1. That's all you got to know is there's plant aliens. And they picked a very bad place to land.
Yeah.
That's great. You can find us at the normal place, Xavier Files Online. That's where you get all of the latest and greatest of X-Men news, criticism, articles, stuff about Sonic the Hedgehog now, I guess. Apparently we're a Sonic the Hedgehog website now, too, which is so much fun. Also, Xavier Files on Twitter. Adam, where can people find your twisted brand of humor?
Guys, you can always follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy, and Zach is at Xavier Files. We're going back to Asgard next week, aren't we, Zach?
We are going back to Asgard next week. We're going to talk about some times when people go to Asgard, but not the good time. Not
my favorite time.
We're doing all the other ones now. One last time, everyone, let's give it a big round of applause for Leah Williams. Go buy her book. There's only 2 of us who can clap.
That's okay. They're clapping at
Thanks for
home.
having me, guys. It's always fun.
It's great. But until then, guys, this has been Battle of the Atom. We hope you survived the experience.
Get it!